Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sabir, and I run events here at the Strand. Before we launch into tonight's panel event, co-produced with feminist giant, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers and authors like tonight's panelists, we wouldn't be here today, and we are so appreciative of it. Tonight, we are thrilled to partner with feminist giant as Mona Eltahawy convenes a panel of LGBTQIA authors from the Middle East, North Africa, and of Arab descent to discuss writing between identities. Mona Eltahawy is a feminist author, commentator, and disruptor of patriarchy. Her first book, Headscarves and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution, targeted patriarchy in the Middle East and North Africa. And her second, The Seven Necessary Sins for Women and Girls, took her disruption worldwide. Her commentary has appeared in media around the world, and she makes video essays as Feminist Giant, which is also the name of the newsletter of which she is founder and editor-in-chief. Tonight's panel features Rabih Alameddine, Zaina Arafat, Randa Jarrar, Zeyn Joukhadar, and Hasan Namir. Rabih Alameddine is the author of the novels An Unnecessary Woman, I the Divine, Kool-Aids, The Hakawati, and the story collection The Perv. In 2019, he won the Dos Passos Prize. His novel, The Wrong End of the Telescope, will be published this September. Zaina Arafat is a LGBTQ Palestinian-American writer based in Brooklyn. Her debut novel, You Exist Too Much, was selected as an Indie Next Pick for June and has been praised by Oprah Magazine, Vogue, Elle, Harper's Bazaar, NPR, LitHub, and Good Morning America. Randa Jarrar is the author of the novel A Map of Home and the collection of stories Him, Me, Muhammad Ali. She's a recipient of a Creative Capital Award and an American Book Award, as well as awards and fellowships from the Civitella Ranieri Foundation, the Lannan Foundation, Hedgebrook, Penn, and others. Her most recent book is the memoir Love is an Ex-Country. Zeyn Joukhadar is the author of the novels The Map of Salt and Stars and The 30 Names of Night. The 30 Names of Night won the 2021 Stonewall Book Award and is a 2021 Lambda Literary Awards winner. The Map of Salt and Stars, currently being translated into 20 languages, was a 2018 Middle East Book Award winner and a 2018 Goodreads Choice Awards finalist. Iraqi-Canadian author Hasan Namir is the author of God in Pink, which won the Lambda Literary Award for Best Gay Fiction and was chosen as one of the top 100 books of 2015 by the Globe and Mail. He is also the author of the poetry book Wartorn and the children's books The Name I Call Myself and Umbilical Cord. And so now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mona Eltahawy to the stage.
Thank you, Sabir. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Mona Eltahawy, as you just heard. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I begin everything with my declaration of faith, fuck the patriarchy. And before I continue, I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am on unceded indigenous land. The Kanyan Kehaka Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands on waters on which the city of Montreal, where I am joining you from today, stands. Now, I am so excited to be co-presenting this incredible panel of authors with The Strand, one of my favorite bookshops in the world. I will tell you very quickly about Feminist Giant because I want to move immediately to the authors. Feminist Giant is a newsletter that I launched in the middle of the pandemic when it was clear that the pandemic was going to fuck over everyone who is not a white, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied, wealthy man. And I wanted to create something out of feminist anarchist resistance that was available and free to everyone. And that is what Feminist Giant does. Twice a week, two paid interns collect feminist resistance news from around the world. And once a week, I write a feminist essay. And I'm hoping by offering all of this for free, that I am giving inspiration and power to everyone who is not a white, cis, het, able-bodied, wealthy man. Feminist Giant is free to everyone, but if you can pay, it helps to keep it free. That's all you need to know about Feminist Giant, and I hope that there will be many more events in the future. I'm now going to ask this incredible panel to turn on their videos and audio so we can all join you in what I know will be a brilliant conversation. I wish we could talk for hours, but sadly it is just for 1 hour. Welcome everyone, ahlan wa sahlan. It's beautiful to see you all.
Hi. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Delighted to have you all. I'm thrilled and honored. And I'm going to begin with Rabih, because Rabih, you are the OG. Now, for you, the G is going to be gay and grumpy, but for the rest of us, it's the original gangster, baby. That's what you are.
I was thinking, shouldn't I be like the original relic?
What? No, come on. When we first met, now, you know I love to tell everyone this story, but when we first met, I ran up to you and I said to you, I read Kool-Aid in 1999 and it fucking blew my mind and we are going to be friends. And you were like, who is this woman?
And I ran in the other direction.
I know, I chased after you. But I do remember you told me, this was, I think, June of 2011, all the incredible revolutions and uprisings had began. And you said to me, I am the Arab Spring, because of course your name is Rabih and it means spring. And you are, Habibi, you are the revolution. And this is why when you told me you could make it, I was jumping up and down. So I begin with you because it is significant that we're having this panel this month, because just a few days ago, I spoke at a memorial for Sarah Hijazi, a queer feminist Egyptian who died in exile last year in June. And it was a memorial that was, of course, full of grief and mourning, but it was also a memorial that was full of joy and dancing and singing as we celebrate what Sarah's legacy is. And to begin talking about Sarah's legacy, Rabih, I want to talk about what you began, because truly Kool-Aid was a revolution. It showed me ways of being that I had not seen before. And I just finished reading your new book, The Wrong End of the Telescope, and to have those two bookends at this time of the world that we're going through is truly a gift. So I begin by acknowledging you. You're going to hate me for this, but
honey, I hate you for many things. So it's just...
See, I don't have a cynical bone in my body. I earnestly love you. But Rabih, as you look at us now and consider us your whatever you want, your siblings, your descendants, how do you see the queer revolution that Kool-Aid was such a herald for?
It's difficult to see it, and again, I don't think of this panel as siblings or it's like peers, because I don't think if there is a revolution, I don't think a revolution is ever by one person. But I don't think of it that way. I mean, I wrote Kool-Aids because I was angry and I was furious as to what I was seeing in the world. I was angry at how, not just, how heterosexuals were treating gay men, but how gay men were treating each other. As we were in the midst of an AIDS crisis, and I was just hurt that a lot of the books that I was reading was asking for permission to exist. It was this thing where a lot of the AIDS memoirs, and I loved them. I mean, again, it might have been necessary at that point to go, we are human, just like you. And I wasn't thinking of a revolution. I was just thinking I wanted to go and say, fuck you. I deserve to be here. It has nothing to do with asking for permission. You have to ask for my approval to let you be in my life, as opposed to the other way around. So it wasn't a revolution. I never think of the greater world in general. I think of how angry I am, or how, neurotic I am, and I work that way. And I'm assuming most writers here do the same thing. It's a personal response to a worldwide or it's a personal response to a transpersonal event.
Mhm. I'm so glad that you launched us with these incredible words, because I think anger and rage are at the heart of so many revolutions. I mean, something has got to give, and this fuck you is so important. As you know, I'm sure we all are incredible fans of profanity. But what you said is a wonderful bridge to bring in Zeyn into the conversation, because for each of you, I've taken particular sentences from your work that I want to bring into the room and have you kind of bounce off that and talk about your new books. And Zeyn, one of the many sentences that struck me from the 30 Names of Night that I feel melds really beautifully with what Rabih just said is when Nadir, the protagonist, says, "It is terrifying to be visible. I have been wanting all my life to be seen." And this feeling of you don't feel that you deserve that you can exist or that you deserve to exist, but then when you're finally seen, but then you also understand the consequence of being seen. Talk to us about that and how that went into the creation of this gorgeous book of yours, which is going to stay with me for a really long time.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that book was, for me, was about trying to figure out for myself, I mean, much as Rabih was saying, that a lot of when we start writing anything, it's like either a way of answering a question for ourselves personally or like figuring something out for ourselves. And a lot of that book is trying to like, one, to situate, for me to like situate me or someone like me in history, and to have that person exist on the page, embodied in their fullness, in a way that was not presented as any kind of like anachronism or something that was new in any kind of way. And I think, you know, for that character, as I think for a lot of us, part of being seen is also like being able to see each other, and being able sometimes to look back into the past and say, well, I may not have, you know, the exact information that I'm looking for and the exact words that I'm using now, but I can still see evidence that we existed forever is huge. But at the same time, yeah, being visible also can make you a target. It can make you vulnerable, not just to, you know, sort of oppressive societal forces, of which there are many on many different levels, but also just that the character's vulnerability and willingness to be seen also entails being seen by the people that love him, and in a way that has much more gravity to it, because if he can't be loved for who he actually is, it's a much more difficult thing for him to swallow than just saying, well, they'll never know me as I am. But I think that's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, especially in a lot of my work, that idea that like we also have to be able to envision for ourselves that it's actually possible to do that, you know, that before we actually, before that happens, that being seen happens, we have to actually say, I believe that it's possible to be witnessed by the people who love me in a fully present and embodied way. So I think that hope is central and comes before everything, you know.
Yes, thank you. And Zaina, that brings me beautifully onto you and your gorgeous book, which also won a Lambda Award for bisexual fiction.
Thank you.
And so mabruk to you and mabruk to Zeyn. Hasan, I know you won a Lambda for God is Pink. So mabruk to everyone, mabruk all of you, all around. Because you heard all the awards you all won from Sabir. So Zaina, the sentence that I bring from You Exist Too Much is, appetite is embarrassing enough, visibly trying to satiate it, utterly mortifying. How does that sentence speak to what you wanted to bring to your novel?
Yeah, so I mean, so much of the novel and the protagonist's struggle is indeed about appetite and sort of suppression of appetite. And that is something that she does both due to external forces, like, her sort of family, various aspects of how she sort of moves through her culture, but also an internal sort of self-loathing that she's sort of struggling with, and internalized homophobia, and that she's sort of seeking to, overcome over the course of the novel. And so that line, appetite is embarrassing enough, visibly trying to satiate it, utterly mortifying, sort of speaks to, I guess, the sort of shame she feels for the, people that she desires. And the sort of I think also, it also speaks to feeling ashamed about feeling ashamed, like there's something almost embarrassing for her about struggling with that aspect of herself and not being able to fully embrace it because of, internal and external reasons. And primarily, I think the internal factors that are preventing her from embracing that are what she finds most shameful. And so, yeah, I mean, in various ways, the character is sort of grappling with appetite. She at some point has anorexia, which is, a refute, and the sort of repressed desire she feels both for, food, for lovers, for what have you, manifest in such unhealthy ways until she's able to really sort of embrace appetite, and not try and negate it. So yeah, that's what that line speaks to.
Thank you. So visibility and existence and being seen bring me beautifully to you, Randa Habibti, who can miss you? You are absolutely gorgeously visible. And that, I think, among the many things that you achieve in your memoir is the glorious victory of your many journeys across Love is an Ex country. And I will circle back to that in my second question when I do another round of questions. But I actually wanted to begin with you, Randa, with a video that you recently made that was like a love letter to the artist, Laura Aguilar, I believe. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but it was this incredible video that you made on the rocks by the beach that Instagram actually fucking brought down. I mean, for fuck's sake. So I'm like, tell us about that video and tell us about the visibility of responding to this incredible artist with your incredible art and having these fascist fucks of Instagram, during Pride, censor it.
It's an honor to be censored by Instagram. It is a trash can. Fuck Instagram, fuck Facebook, the ways that they oppress all of us. And while I'm at it, fuck Israel and Saudi Arabia. Anyway, so yeah, no, it was such an honor to be asked by Leslie Lohman, which is a space that, as a younger woman, I would go to in New York and just be in awe of these artists who are our, for mothers or for queers, or even, as Rabih says, hopefully maybe our peers. And I love Laura Aguilar's work. I love the ways that she, was super grumpy and angry at the world, and, felt really out of place at the Plush Pony, which is the lesbian bar that she did a lot of her photography in. And, I love that. I love that this iconic lesbian artist didn't feel comfortable at a lesbian bar, because I never have, and so it's nice to be able to bare myself and to be naked on those rocks the way that she was naked on rocks, and to face the camera instead of away from it, because to her, facing away from it was the vulnerability, and to me, facing towards it is the vulnerability. So yeah, just for me, the quest is always to remain vulnerable and angry, and naked. So
Beautifully said. Thank you. And we will circle back to more in my next round of questions, because that is now my beautiful bridge to Hasan. Hasan, the quote that I pulled out, because I'm first going to talk about your beautiful children's book here, the name I call myself. And the illustrations are by Catherine John. And I just want to pull up one of the illustrations and then read what you write next to it. This is from When I Was 6. And it's this glorious illustration here. And the words are, I am 6. I like playing with dolls. They are awesome superheroes. My dad cuts my hair so short. He says, this is what a boy looks like. And I love all your books, but I love this particular book because when I was 7, my family moved to London from Cairo and my hair was really short. My mom kept it deliberately short. And the first thing the kids said to me, and I barely spoke a word of English, was they asked me, are you a boy or a girl? And I read your book and I was like, fuck, I wish this book existed when I was 7. So tell me about why you wrote this beautiful, beautiful book about a non-binary child.
For sure, because like Ari in the book, I actually went through a very similar experience, especially during my childhood years. I was born in Iraq in 1987, and I grew up there until I was 11 years old. And growing up, I was attracted to playing with dolls. I used to wear my sister's dresses. We used to play a beauty pageant. And I always felt like I was different than all my cousins. And I felt like I was an outsider. I didn't really feel I could belong anywhere, and I used to always be made fun of. So in my poetry book, Wartorn, I had a poem where basically I was the last chosen when it was like my cousins playing soccer. I was always chosen last because I wasn't really good at any sports. So I always felt like I was different. I always felt that I was like a girl hiding inside a man's body, and I wanted to be a girl for a long time. But growing up, you're told you have to act like a boy, so I couldn't really be true to myself. But now, I'm married to my husband Tarn, and I'm a mother and a father at home. So to our son Malik, so at least I can be who I want to be, wherever I want to, and be true to myself. So I wrote this book really as a message of hope for other kids out there that felt like Ari or myself, that it's okay to be true to yourself. That even though others may not accept who you are or really see the beauty in you, that as long as you love yourself, and that's all that matters, because at the end, you're your own, defense. And that can protect from anybody else out there. So loving yourself is most important, and accepting yourself for who you are. Because for a long time, I didn't love myself, and I really wished I could. Now, if I could go back in time, I would really do things differently, but I couldn't, because I was told that being, queer wasn't something that could be accepted, especially here in the, I come from a Muslim family, and it was just really tough. But yeah, over time, I'm just like, now I finally came in terms with myself, and I'm in a place where I can be Muslim, I can be queer, and I know God loves me just the way I am, and that's all that matters. So.
Thank you. Beautifully said. I mean, I've got a whole pile of books now to give for all the young people who come to Tantamona and say, where do I go? And I just say, read these books and fuck off, which leads me back to Rabih. Because of course, whenever I tell someone to fuck off in a grumpy way, it has to lead me back to Rabih. No, I'm actually back to you, Rabih, because I went to Beirut for the first time, shamefully late in my life, in 2009. But during that very first visit to Beirut, I went to a book reading, and it was the first time in my life, just as Kool-Aid blew my fucking mind, because it was the first time I read an openly gay Arab author writing about openly gay Arab protagonists. This book reading in 2009 was the first time in my life that 2 women who identified as lesbians were on stage reading in English and Arabic from a book called Barid Mistajil. Mm-hmm. was published at the time by a lesbian, bisexual, and trans women's collective called Meme, from the letter in the Arabic word mithli, from mithliya. So now the queer community in Egypt is called Mujtama' Meme, from this Arabic letter. So that was the first time. And in reading that collective, because I bought the book and I read it was a collection of oral narratives of lesbian, bisexual, and trans women across Lebanon, across, ethnic divides, religious divides, all the divides. And one of the themes that came up again and again, and this is kind of like, this now touches the second round of questions, is, migration. And what happens, because I believe that your work, all of you, You write about migration, you write about home, you write about borders, you write about leaving, and you write about identity in ways that make it clear that migration and exile are not the kind of like a panacea, and not the kind of like this kind of brilliant paradise that is the end of everything. Because as many of the oral narratives showed clearly, when you migrate as a queer person, you end up facing a whole different set of oppressions. I mean, some of Sarah Higazi's friends said in the memorial that she was at times comforting her therapist in Toronto, Canada, because her therapist was crying in the middle of therapy sessions, which says to me that these countries that are welcoming refugees are wholly unprepared for the kind of the mental health and emotional issues that come up with migration and refugees, and especially with queer migration. And so that's my long-winded way, Rabia, of coming to a sentence that stayed with me from the time that I read Kool-Aid, and I think goes also to the heart of the wrong end of the telescope. And it's when one of your characters in Kool-Aid says, "In Lebanon, I belonged, but I did not fit. And in America, I didn't fit in. And in America, I fit in, but I did not belong." How does that inform your upcoming book, which I believe is being published in October, and involves a protagonist who goes to Lesbos to help with refugees and kind of looks ahead to the future that they have? How does that fit in with your upcoming novel?
Again, difficult to answer. My work, like a lot of people here, is about dislocation, belonging and fitting, or as most of the time, not belonging and not fitting. I actually believe that one cannot write if one belonged completely. I call it a Goldilocks distance. Being in, like for example, if I want to write about my family, if I am totally enmeshed in my family, I am too close to see it. If I am too far away from my family, I am too far to see it. So there's a Goldilocks distance, just the right. And that is different for every writer. But what is important is that whether one migrates or not, fitting and not fitting is an artist or a writer's situation all the time. I'm willing to bet as much money as you want that all 6 other panelists on here or are just totally never really belonged. You could have the most loving family, which I did. I never really felt that I belonged. I was always odd. As a friend of mine, another writer once said, "Oh, darling, we were always the losers in high school." We don't have to be completely, but this whole idea of not being the popular one, the fitting in, is what forces us to look at the world differently. But as to migration, in some ways, I don't blame countries where migration comes to, because it's like in Lebanon, it's not that much better how we treat Syrian refugees or how we treat Palestinians or how we treat domestic workers. So I look at it as a dominant culture and how that dominant culture treats the other, whether that other is gay people, whether that other is migrants, whether that other is trans, or and if you notice in this country, every decade or so the enemy changes. It's like when I first came to this country, it was definitely queer, like everything was against gay. Now it's primarily against Muslims and liberals and whatever you want to call it. But I realized, and I put that in my book, that at one point I started putting nail polish on, and the people at the Homeland Security would say, "Welcome home." For the first time, Muslims became worse than queers. So I was more accepted as queer and less accepted as, even though I'm not a Muslim, less accepted as this foreign Arab thing. And that's why I've always said, and I've had this conversation with Randa many times, that yes, I'm gay, yes, I'm gay, yes, I'm an Arab, so I am a gay writer, I'm an Arab writer, and I'm an Arab American writer. But the truth is, I am, shall we say, a fuck you writer. I am a writer who goes outside of the dominant culture and write against the dominant culture. And again, that's how, for me, it makes it a bigger, wider net. You know, that if we include all of us who don't fit in, it's a bigger net than being gay or being Arab, intersectionality or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, I hear you. And I think, you know, in reading all your books, I felt like each of the books were speaking to each other because borders and bodies and erasure and visibility and identity and religion or not and culture or not, dominant or not, so many of those things were just bouncing around my mind as I was reading your books. And Zeyn, to continue with the theme of migration and migrating, it was an essay, I think I read an essay that you wrote for Shondaland, perhaps it was, in which you talk about spending the beginning of the pandemic. I believe you're still in Italy, but you talk about what it was like at the beginning of the pandemic. And you mentioned that you went to a talk by an Italian trans activist, and she told you to consider transition rather than something with an endpoint, something that continuously evolves. And when I read that, and I read in your book, you know, I know it was something else, it was another interview, you also talked about the different types of erasure where because you don't use the protagonist's name at first until he chooses the name Nadir. So he seems to have been erased, but it's a deliberate erasure that you consider a form of liberation, an empowering kind of erasure, rather than the kind of erasure that disempowers. So let's talk for a bit about that transition without an endpoint and migration without an endpoint. That is a way of liberating oneself through a deliberate kind of erasure. I've made my question very, very complicated, and that's because I want to ask you so many things at once, but I hope I'm clear.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, you know, and I'm going to try to sort of piece together my thoughts because my thoughts are also a little all over the place in response to that. I think that migration and transition do have a lot in common in the sense that they're both, well, for one thing, that they're both perceived as being this very, by dominant culture, let's say, as being very like point A to point B, and they're almost never like that. I remember actually I had a lot of questions about this primarily from white readers who are not immigrants, let's say, so non-immigrant white readers, about my first book, where people were asking, like, it doesn't make any sense that the main character's family returns to Syria after coming to America. Why would they want to go back? Which is obviously just so out of touch with like how actual people move in the real world, and all of the reasons why you don't just arrive and then never leave again, and speaks a lot to what America thinks of itself. But I think, you know, when I was sitting down to write 30 Names of Night, and I was thinking about this protagonist who is non-binary, and what my own transition has been like as a non-binary person, I think what I wanted to get at was this sense that there is no, of having nothing sort of laid out for you or prescribed for you in a way that you can make sense of, in the sense that there are things that are laid out as like, oh, well, you should do this, or you should do that, or you shouldn't do this. And there are things that you can do that will make cis people see you as more valid or less valid. And to some extent, unfortunately, that also certain kinds of other trans people will also see you as more or less valid. And that like ultimately none of that in the end really has anything to do with how you feel about yourself. And we may not even have the language for what those things look like in the way that will feel the best to us. And so what do you do when you don't have the language for that? And what do you, and I think that's where, you know, I'm not trying to work in like how this relates to migration. And I guess what it is just that you don't know where you're going to end up. I was actually, the best way I think I can answer is this question is that the other day I was talking to a friend who was asking for ideas of what to talk about with teens who were, I think they were speaking to a group of like queer and trans teens, or just teens in general, some of whom might have been LGBTQ, and like, what would you tell, you know, your younger self? And I said to this particular friend, you know, I wish that I had known earlier, and that I understand now about myself, that you can move toward hope where it lives in your body and in your life without necessarily knowing where that's going to take you, and that it is a feeling that you can feel even physically, in terms of what embodiment can look like for you and what you need to do to arrive there. And you don't necessarily have to understand it as an endpoint that you can perfectly see and imagine, that you can perfectly know what you want to look and feel like. You can just move toward it. And I don't know. I think sometimes that's all that we can do, you know?
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I love that, like moving towards something, because what I have to ask Zaina next is home, because the idea of home coming up, when it comes up in You Exist Too Much, I mean, along with the title You Exist Too Much, a novel that has a protagonist that is never named. So we know why the protagonist initially in Zeyn's novel is not named until he chooses his own name, Nader, which means rare. But your protagonist, Zaina, is never named. And your protagonist is Palestinian American. And your protagonist seems to be constantly trying to move towards that kind of like, you know, that point of home. And I read in an interview somewhere that you said home for you is on the page where you can write. So what was it like to write about a character who seems to be constantly searching for a home that she doesn't find under a name that she doesn't have? And again, I hope my question makes sense. I'm trying to ask you 10 questions in one.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, I close my eyes when I think, because it's a very thought-provoking question. So I have my eyes closed. But like, yeah, I mean, so I think that what's so much of the book and so much of this character is what defines her is a constant sense of longing, and the sort of parallel between not having a name and not having, you know, a real sense of home sort of guides her search in some way. I mean, so her not having a name comes from the, you know, the title is You Exist Too Much, as you say, and when you tell someone you exist too much or make them feel like they exist too much, you essentially are saying to them you should exist less. And so as a result, you know, and that impulse or that command comes from her mother, but also kind of comes from being the reality of being Palestinian, of being made to feel like you should take up less space in the world and you should exist less, the reality of being a queer Palestinian as well, right? And so as a result, I sort of took away her name as a sort of homage to that sentiment. And the journey, her journey or her trajectory is from going from a place of feeling like she isn't valid to exist in her own right, that she doesn't really, you know, have any place that she feels rooted in. So from going from that place to arriving at a place where she does feel, you know, or at least gets closer to feeling like she can take up space in the world and she can like lay claim to some place, and that she can sort of like rest from that constant longing, constant sort of searching, all of which sort of ties together with this impulse of feeling like one can't just exist as one is and in the space that one inhabits, and not really knowing what that space even is. So yeah, if that answers the question.
It does beautifully. Thank you, Zaina. And it also leads me wonderfully to Randa. And the sentence that I picked out of your beautiful memoir, Randa, is, I write what I like and say what I like and fuck whomever I like, which is so gorgeously you. But I picked that out because, you know, every Pride, this comes up, you know, and outside of Pride too. This ridiculous sentence, love is love. I mean, what the fuck does that mean? This isn't what Pride is about. It's about fucking. Like, homophobes are not upset because people love each other. Homophobes and transphobes are upset because people want to fuck who they want to fuck. And that's what you say openly in your book. And so I wanted to actually come to you, and now all of you write about sex in your books, but I wanted to talk to Randa and Hasan especially about sex, because you both write so wonderfully about this unabashed carnality. You're like, this is about fucking. So Randa, let's talk about fucking.
Oh my God, finally, Mona. And I'm just, okay, so, yeah, I think, okay, well, so for me, it is definitely about fucking, but one thing I've been noticing recently is like the ways that people just don't understand gender, and the fact that it's actually, the gender part is not about fucking, right? It's about who you are and what you feel. So just want to clarify that. But yeah, so that part of my book came up in I just love existing too much. And I understand that a lot of people don't like that about people who exist too much. And for me, I'm constantly seeing the ways that my messy, fat existence ends up being a trigger to so many people. And that to me shows like there's something under that I like really want to excavate and look at. It's not me. It's definitely has nothing to do with me, right? As a person and who I am. But it has to do with this, since it is Pride Month, it has to do with this heteronormative, this idea that being hetero and being on a binary, being cisgender is the way to be. When in reality, for me, like, that is the weirdest way to be, or one other way to be, right? So this idea that heterosexuality is the dominant, sort of, what word am I looking for? Like what the baseline should be is, to me, in itself, like kind of funny and queer. I'm like, that's very specific. That's a very specific. So you like missionary, and you like wearing these types of outfits that you can get ready-made from these types of places that are labeled men, women, like you really are a sub who needs to kind of like be told how to be, right? And so I think I enjoy my existence as someone outside of that. And I want my books, I think of them all as part of a larger project that, pushes against that and says, no, I don't want that. I don't give a fuck about that. I don't care if I'm perceived as immature for being like, I want to do what I want, but it's actually why I do everything I do, just because I want to. So just, like honoring that desire. I don't even remember the question you're asking, but just the desire.
It was just fucking, Randa, that's all.
Oh yeah, fucking. Oh yeah, and plus fucking is wonderful. Like, fucking is free. Fucking, well, sometimes, I mean, you can charge, and that's wonderful. Like, sex work is very important. And you can pay for sex and all of that. But what I'm talking about is like this idea of having ownership over your sexuality. That could mean not fucking. That could mean, it just could mean so many things. And it's, yeah, I'm a fan. 10 stars.
Thumbs up for fucking. Thumbs up.
Or down, in, whatever.
As long as you want it in whatever way you want it, it's all about consent and agency.
Exactly.
Which leads me to your poetry, Hasan, because I first discovered you through your poetry when I bought Wartorn. And I'm just going to read a very short poem as my sentences for you. It's called The Piano. Hold my piano hands and blow. Slurp my semen and my children, push deeper and make me sore. Fuck me kindly and make me torn. Taste this milky blood and inhale, make me a man. Take me home, bend me in half and blow. Let me, Ruti, jump and send my salam. make me snort and fly high. Now, when I wrote your book, I was like, fuck yes, oh my God, incredible. So Hasan, talk to me about this unabashed carnality, especially when, you know, so much of what being queer today in this kind of like very, very mainstream, acceptable, no kink of pride, love is love kind of thing seems to want to quash that kind of unabashed carnality.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, like I grew up my, whole life being told that, you can't be gay, it's haram, sleeping with a man. The story of Lut, I'm sure, it's been passed on for so long. So I wrote Wartorn to highlight that struggle, that, this whole pinkwashing really, I can't relate to that myself. Like I struggled, every time I used to, when I used to have sex with, with men before and everything, of course I'm married now, but, before when I was still young and sleeping around and stuff, I used to always feel guilty after each time, because I remember the things that my parents used to tell me, and I remember the Quranic verses. And so I wanted to really write that book as an exploration of that struggle, between oneself versus family, sexual orientation, gender identity versus religion. Because in a lot of ways, and honestly, in a lot of ways, I'm very religious in a lot of ways, ideologically, I love my religion so much. I love Islam, and I sure, I don't pray 5 times a day, but I believe in the religion, and I've read the Quran twice. So for me, it's that whole struggle is just, it's been ongoing for a long time. So I wrote that book as a sort of an exploration. A lot of it was sort of my poem, my stories, but a lot of it was also with other queer, Arabs and Muslims that went through a similar struggle. So I wanted to elevate their voices, and because often they're marginalized, and you don't hear much about them. One of the poems I wrote about Karar Nushi and Hamid al-Tayari and other queer folks that were murdered in Iraq for being gay, or other ones where ISIS threw them off, the bridge and stuff. So it's not a perfect world. A lot of the times they're murdered, they're being executed, imprisoned. So I wanted to write that to show the reality of the situation, and to also to become a message of hope. I wanted to give these stories to know that these people exist, and that they all go, I went through a very similar struggle. So I know their voice. They matter in this world, and it's beyond the parade and beyond the rainbow flags. It's much more than that. And that's what I really hope to do. So yeah, it's there's a lot of Quranic verses that sort of they go against the ones about the angels with the pearls that men will have, the young boys and all that. So I really explored these conflicting Quranic verses, and the story of Lut, the idea of Luti and Shad, 2 words that's being often used to as vulgars against queer people in the Middle East, especially in the Arab world. And I hear that often. Oh, Shad, queer, especially in the Arab world, when you hear, they don't say Mithliyin, they don't have any respect for them in the media. So I kind of started exploring this idea of queer and Shad and Luti, and to sort of find my own self within all these explorations, but at the same time, give those marginalized a voice, and that they exist beyond the hate and all that. So
thank you, Hasan. And actually that reminds me that, Rabih, I want to also bring you into to this discussion, or ask you to comment on this no kink in pride, because I remember when, just before you published The Angel of History, you were like, oh, I'm going to piss so many people off with all the kink in my book. And I was like, fuck yes, Rabih, give it to them. So let's talk about kink, no kink at Pride and all this fuckery.
I have a better idea. How about no pride?
Oh, okay. Then let's talk about that.
It has been going on for so long. And always, I have to hold my nose and okay, whatever. But really, why? I mean, why is it sponsored by Bud Light and Wells Fargo, and we're selling vodka and no kink at Pride? It's fuck, no pride. Again, this whole thing of who the fuck are you to tell me what I can or cannot do? It's fascinating. And who elected you to be the representative of me? You know, so for me, it's never been a question, you know, it's like, it's never been an issue. You know, maybe I was born, I don't know, it's like, I keep thinking, what's wrong with me? You know, I never wanted permission. I never wanted, it's like, you know, there's a world outside and I'm too grumpy for it. It's like pride, you know, what, you know, it's like to get drunk and do nothing is beyond me. It's beyond me, you know. It's like, anyway, you know, I've said it many times that, you know, for a lot of people, what they think, I mean, I keep wanting to say, we are not Ellen. Okay, and nothing against Ellen. It's just that we are not Ellen. You know, there's more to, it's like I kept thinking one time that for a lot of people, they think that rough sex is for a lot of gay men, they think that rough sex is basically sleeping on cotton sheets that are less than 600 count. You know, that's not okay. You know, it's not just, it's not okay. You know, it's like, I don't know. Again, I got just fuck pride. I never really cared for it. It was never my thing. You know, I'm too, like, I'm not proud. I am.
That is a beautiful conclusion, Rabia. Thank you so much, because now I have to bring in, I think, one question. And I don't even know if we have time for this one question, because I have monopolized all of your wonderful time. But I do have one question here by someone who is asking, this is an anonymous attendee, who says that they keep thinking of Zaina's title, You Exist Too Much. You all navigate so many, actually, you know what, sorry, I think we've already touched on this question. So I'm gonna end with this, another attendee who asks, I follow you all, and I note that you all discuss politics for an extent on social. Do you feel a duty, responsibility to do so, and or do you want to? Does anyone want to answer this question about feeling a duty or responsibility?
Yeah, I feel like I don't have a choice. I think that saying that you don't talk politics is a political opinion or a political stance in itself. So fuck the police. That's another thing I just wanted to throw in here. Yeah, and I think that it's not really politics. I'm talking about our lives. I'm talking about the ways that the places where I'm historically from are being annihilated and settled by people who aren't from there. I'm talking about the place I live in, you know, oppressing the people who, you know, built this place. And I'm talking, yeah, it's really, anyway, everything is political.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to touch on, do you feel a responsibility or do you want to be political?
I think that the question comes, and I'm not insulting the questioner, but to ask that question comes from a, such, shall we say, place of privilege, that people can think that there is a way of existence that is beyond political, are only people who the political system works to their benefit. Those of us who are in the margins, no matter what it is, whether, you know, it's racial, sexual, or poor, or whatever, basically politics affects us in ways that actually can kill us. And if we don't pay attention and, you know, state our claim, we'll be dead. Silence equals death.
Right. I think someone else had wanted to answer too. Was it you, Zeyn, or Zaina?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I put my hand up, but I mean, I was just going to say that, like, I mean, me walking outside is political to some people. So it's like, if I say anything, it's political. And yeah, so I'm just echoing what Randa and Rabia said, but it's not something you can avoid when you're trying to survive.
Yeah. Zaina and Hasan, either one of you?
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. Like, existence as such in our bodies is very sort of political. Being Palestinian is inherently such. And I think what I was going to say was that I was always, when I entered the world of like literary writing, and, you know, I was always sort of encouraged to try and be, quote unquote, like, to sort of be less political, because of the fact that, you know, if you have a certain ideology, of course, as Palestinian, and you're coming up against a very biased, you know, media system here, that can lead to some tensions and some problems. But I think it's almost impossible to heed that advice. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess that's my answer to that question, is that, like, no, I certainly don't feel a responsibility. I mean, it's like in the blood, and it's something that you're sort of told. And you, I mean, as I know many other Palestinians that have been told to sort of like tone it down, you know, whatever, for the sake of this, for the sake of that. And, you know, it's very,
one of my favorite, sorry to interrupt, but one of my favorite poems recently was, I think, Nur al-Hindi, a poem that said, you know, fuck your lecture on craft, my people are dying. I mean, that is a superb title, and the poem is great, you know, but fuck your lecture on craft.
Right, the luxury of craft when, like, people are being annihilated.
But again, sorry, but this thing of people telling you or telling me that, you know, you can be less political, being, you know, not political is a political act in and of itself. So when the dominant culture is so massive and so influential, and somebody goes against it, to say that this is political is an insult, because going, you know, representing the dominant culture is also a political act. And I'm upset now.
But Rabih, this is what we expect of you. The fuck yous and the grumpiness. You're fantastic. You're in fine form, Habibi. So I'm going to keep talking with you all until someone from the Strand comes in and says, okay, that's it. So we have another question about, would anyone like to comment about how Arabic is evolving when it comes to language use? Because, you know, Hasan, you mentioned Luti and Shadh, and I know because last year I was speaking at a festival in the Netherlands called Read My World, and several of the attendees there were of North African descent, and there was a Moroccan queer person there who said that in Morocco, and I'm sure that in many other countries across the region as well, words like Shadh and the equivalent have been taken back, you know, in the way that queer has been taken, you know, by the queer community. So I'm seeing a process of words that used to be considered pejorative and homophobic being now taken back in Arabic, in the local dialects by the queer community, and saying, fuck you, we will use those words for ourselves. So would anyone like to comment about Arabic and how Arabic is evolving to be more inclusive, or as like appropriating words that were once used to hurt us? Anyone?
I think it's a bit of both for sure. Like, I think right now, I was just reading online in Egypt the other day, they were just saying, oh, you know, Shaz, like they're still using these words, Shaz, you know, but I'm also seeing Mitliyin is being used as well. Some news articles do use Mitliyin. So I'm like, okay, wow. So we are moving forward for sure. Where are we going to see the Arab world? Like, is this going to evolve anytime soon? Probably not. I mean, when you have like in Saudi Arabia and even in Iraq where they're being executed and you can't really be, you know, gay, I think we still have a lot more work to do. But I think, yeah, I think we're slowly getting there, especially in the media. The media is slowly trying to include, you know, queer voices and trying to portray queer people in a positive way. I remember Amir Ashur, he's the organizer of Iraq Queer in Iraq. He had an interview with like this Iraqi news, Sharqiya, and they showed it on TV, like his interview with him, and then after that they removed it because they were getting a lot of backlash. But you know, the fact that they did that, I think, is a huge step forward. I know the people's reaction, like Iraqis and other Arabs, they're still, you know, like, you know, when Khalid Abu Nega retweeted something about queer people on Twitter, and I was just reading people's comments, and there was just a lot of like hate still, and, you know, like, oh, you can't force this on us, we're not westernized, we're still Arab and stuff. So I know a lot of people's mentality is still not there yet, but it's slowly getting there. But I know there's a lot more work to do for sure.
Mm-hmm. Would anyone else like to comment? There's the Strand. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you all so much. What a lovely, lovely event. Definitely during these times when we need all these different perspectives. Mona, thank you for collaborating with us with Feminist Giant, Zaina, Hasan, Zeyn, Randa, Rabih. Thank you so much. To our audience member, if you'd like to make a purchase of any of the titles that we discussed today, there's a link on the chat. If anyone else has anything to say, I think we're ready to close the event.
Well, I would like to close the event as I close all my events with fuck the patriarchy.
Of course,
that
yes.
is our biggest enemy, fuck the patriarchy. And I want to thank all of you. This has been one of the best evenings of this fucking pandemic. I send you all love and solidarity. Thank you. You are my siblings and comrades. I love you all.
Thanks
Thank you
so much.
so much.
It's been so lovely.
Thank you.
Shukran. Thank you so much.
Uh,
Have a good evening, everybody.
Everyone, mwah. Bye, guys. Bye.
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 Bye.